Well, good morning, everybody. This is Billy Trout with the Tennessee Department of Revenue's Taxpayer Education section. On behalf of our Commissioner David Geragino and others in our department that are with us today, I want to welcome you to today's presentation of the New Business Workshop. This is our first one for 2023, a brand new year. We're glad you're with us. You guys are ready to hit the ground running in a brand new year and get your business started on the right foot. And we're so glad that you're with us today. We have over 200 people online with us right now, which is tremendous. And the number is growing as we speak. So we'll give people a couple of minutes to continue to join us. I'll introduce to you just briefly a few people that are with us from Taxpayer Services in the Department of Revenue. Mr. Dan Vinson, our assistant director, is with us monitoring our chat today. Katie Julian, who is normally a co-host of this event, who is under the weather, is monitoring your information as well in chat, and we'll be glad to respond to you that way. And we also have Stephanie Bailey, who's in that role as well in our taxpayer education section. And we have Mr. Mitch Gibson with us here. He will be presenting a couple of different topics here to you a little bit later today on business tax and also resources that will be helpful to you. So today, just to kind of let you know here on this first slide that we have, we hope that you've been able to make audio contact with us here. You should be hearing my voice right now. If not, we ask that you maybe leave and come back if that's the situation there too. The participant guide, I believe Katie put a link already in our website, or excuse me, in the chat area there already to our website. So you're welcome to go out and get the materials that we have to present to you today in PDF form. And I think you'll find those real helpful if you'd like to get that. There's a lot of information that we're going to be going through today. A lot of people are just kind of new to this, and we certainly respect the fact that you're new to business. What you might want to do is kind of think uh, slowly as we go through this stuff, that it may not be possible to absorb everything that we're going to be talking about today, because it's just a lot. So just know that you're going to have some resources to go to, and then that'll be fine. I'm seeing a few responses in chat, Katie, and there we go. There's the new link coming back up there. Some people had said they did not see the link, and Katie just put that link back out there one more time. So thanks again, everybody. We're going to be kicking this sucker off right now. We're going to have a break about 9:45 Central Time. We may have another break as well, depending on how things go. And a recording of this presentation is being done right now, and it'll be put on our website probably tomorrow, okay? So we'll go ahead and begin going with the New Business Workshop, Tennessee Department of Revenue. That's not our building, by the way, but that is a building downtown Nashville. And we certainly know that Nashville's growing as much as the state is too. That's why taxes are so important to us, not only at the Department of Revenue, but also with the state of Tennessee. And you as a business owner are a big part of that as well. And we thank you for doing what you do. So just to kind of let you know how we're going to do this today, we have basically three different sections of what we're going to cover. The first section is going to be about setting up your business and a few steps that you can think about, stuff that you may have already thought about, some of you. But if you're really brand new into this sort of thing, you may not have even thought about even the basics. So we're going to hit that. This may be a little bit elementary for some of you, and we apologize for any sort of going back to the basics that you might not need, but we felt that it's kind of important for those that just don't know. So we're going to have that in here for just a little while here too. Then we're going to talk about some basic tax laws with these state tax accounts, business tax and business licensing, and sales tax, which is super important. We'll touch briefly on franchise and excise taxes and a few other taxes as well. And then at the end, Mitch is going to help us find resources. Where can you find resources to help you as you are beginning to start a new business in Tennessee, not only with our department, but with other departments as well? Okay. So that's what we're going to be doing here for the next couple of hours. And I don't know that we're going to spend the whole time. I know we're slated for a 3-hour session. It may not take that long. Make sure that we are, or that you are referring to the PDF guide as we talked about just a little bit ago. And again, we will post a recording of this webinar to our website tomorrow. Okay, here we go. So, everything is about the money, it seems like, in Tennessee. So we thought we'd show you why taxes are so important. So for fiscal year 21 in the state of Tennessee, you can see here that this is how taxes work. In other words, the Department of Revenue, I think we collect somewhere over 90% or right around 90% of the money that is collected overall in the state. Okay, so, and most of this comes from these taxes that you see here. And if you'll notice this graphic, you notice that sales tax is about 58% of what we take in Tennessee. So that is the big dog, and that's where we spend a lot of time talking about different things with sales tax. There's also legislation that's passed every year relative to sales tax, creating exemptions or special situations going on with sales tax too. So that'll happen again this year. It always does. So, and we always put that information on our website, which we'll be touching on in our resources discussion a little bit later. But, you see franchise and excise tax at 21% there too. So you're looking at the lion's share of those two taxes being the big dogs, I guess you could say. But you see so many other taxes too, like alcohol taxes and tobacco taxes, even taxes on your car. When you go in and get a title and registration, we take that money in too. Um, there is the business tax. It's a very small amount on that pie chart there, and we're going to talk about it today because it affects so many businesses. Even though it's a small amount of money overall to the state, it does directly touch most businesses. In fact, the majority of businesses in Tennessee have to deal with business licensing and business tax. So, and then of course the spending of that, you see that dollar bill there written out graphically. You see that 56 cents of every dollar is spent on education in Tennessee, and then 28 cents goes to the general fund. And then, of course, local governments gets a piece of the pie as well. So your local counties and cities out there are benefiting as well. One thing that is super important is to know that what you do as a business owner or potential business owner in Tennessee is that you're creating these funds because of your activities in helping us fund our state. So we'll say it numerous times over, but we thank you very much for what you do. You do such a good job in trying to be compliant and getting this information, and being you attending this thing today, this workshop today, indicates that you're very interested in doing it the right way. And we appreciate that a whole bunch. So this link, and I won't go to the link here right now, but we do have a new business section on our website, and you can find that under the For New Businesses category. The link is right there, and you can go to it at some point there too. But the information that we're going to be going through today is a lot of it is right there actually on the website as well. So the PDF that we keep referring to of the presentation today is going to follow somewhat what you see here on this website. So you have this resource in a couple of different places, and I think you'll find that very helpful to you. All right. So let's talk about the first step in setting up a new business. Okay. So there's several things here you can see in these bullet points that are very important. I'll just talk about them very briefly. First of all, is business structure or entity type. And what that means is, are you going to be a sole proprietor? That means you're working for yourself. Okay. Are you going to have a partnership with someone else? A general partnership? That's the type of thing to think about. Sometimes people set up LLCs or even corporations. Okay. So what you have to decide as you start this whole process is, or which one of these are you going to be? How are you going to set this up? You may not have all that information. We're going to talk about how you can maybe get some information and get somebody to help you determine what would be the best way to go on that. So again, starting off on the right foot and determining your entity structure is a good idea. One thing I'll mention right now that is super important to know is, if you talk to your friends or other people that and they say, well, the best thing to do is to set up an LLC, or the best thing to do is to set up a corporation, blah, blah, blah. It may be, and it may not be. Okay. So if you're getting into business, you really need to be sure of what you're doing before you start. Okay. So don't forget to ask these serious questions about what's happening um, before you get going. Okay. Also, your business name. You can choose the name of your business, the doing business name. You can register that with the Secretary of State's office in certain situations as well. Um, Address is so important too. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Do you need to register with the Secretary of State? If you have an LLC in Tennessee or a corporation in Tennessee doing business here, you definitely do need to register with the Secretary of State's office. You also you need to consider whether you need an EIN, which is an employer identification number. An employer identification number is obtained from the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. So one thing some people think a lot of times is that the Department of Revenue is the IRS, and we are not. We are a state agency, okay? We are completely different than the IRS. We have nothing to do with the IRS. So when you need an employer identification number, you have to go to the IRS for that. Now, something really important to know is uh, when is your business going to actually start? When is it going to start? Um, a lot of times you'll think, okay, well, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to start it today. Well, are you really? I mean, have you thought about everything? Have you got a business plan? Have you figured out your market? Have you determined that you have enough capital, enough money to begin the business and stuff like that? So maybe today is not the best day to start your business. Maybe you need to do some more investigation, and maybe you need to understand that once you say to the Department of Revenue that I'm setting up my tax accounts and I'm beginning on, make up a date, January 1st, 2023. Uh, if you say that's when you start, that is when we believe that you start, because we don't know any different. So we're going to have expectations of you for filing and payment based on when you say your business starts. So you can't come back to us later and say, well, I never started that business and I don't owe franchise and excise tax, or I don't have to file a sales tax return, when indeed you do, even if you have zero sales, which we'll talk about too. So anything, in other words, there's cause and effect on things. Okay. So when you ask for things to start with us, then we believe you and you're going to start things up. So just be real careful with it. We're going to talk about NAICS codes, fiscal years, and establishing directors, officers, and shareholders, and that information online too. So anyway, yeah. All right, so let's keep going here. Hope you guys are going well. I know that we've had several questions in the chat here too. So we're going to be covering those with you, and we've got Dan and Katie and Mitch and Stephanie answering those chat questions right now too. So for setting up a business, we talked about the different types of entities briefly just a few minutes ago. Here's a list of ones that you might be choosing from, and I'm not going to go through this entire list because you can see them right here. One I didn't mention is at the bottom, nonprofits. You might have a nonprofit, and And Katie, we have a small misprint. It's a granted tax exempt status by the IRS. I'm not sure what the IRP is, but that's okay. Anyway, we'll fix that. But we're talking about the IRS granting the nonprofit status too. We do get that question quite a bit. You do need to receive your nonprofit exemption status from the IRS before you apply for a nonprofit with us, unless you happen to be maybe a church or something like that. But you see the others here for normal businesses, sole proprietors probably being the most popular choice among small business owners there too. But all the rest of these can be set up. And the entity number that you see there in the right column is what's required. The social security number, the federal ID numbers, depending on what you have. SM LLC, a single member LLC, meaning one individual, multi-member, meaning that there's can be one or more individuals or entities involved in the registration of that business there. Okay. All right. So we'll talk about names and addresses here too, establishing a business name. The small business website there does have tips on how to select your business name. You can go out there and look at that information on the federal government's website there too. The Secretary of State has a business name availability database. You can look at that resource as well. You can see if your business's name is already in use by a business that's already chartered in the state. Now, one thing to know is that not every business is required to be chartered in our state. In other words, if you're a sole proprietor, you don't have to do that. So there may be another business in Tennessee that has the same business as you, doing business as a DBA name as you do. And if you're a sole proprietor, that's fine. I think it would be a good idea to maybe try to see if you're not using the same name as somebody in your local community. I think that's a good idea to do just to avoid confusion there. As for business addresses, something that is super duper important is that we have your correct addresses, and that means location address. This is where your business is located. It could be your home. Okay, we do need to have that address. It's critically important. There's a couple of reasons. Number one, we want to know where you are so that we can get in contact with you, but also statistically, we measure where businesses are and what type of businesses are where and things like that too. But the local business tax or the business taxes that come back to these local governments, they are dependent on you giving us that correct location address. Okay. And then, of course, the mailing address is very important too. Now, this is going to seem kind of funny for you for just a second, but it's meant to be funny and it's meant to be serious at the same time. We do not have a crystal ball. We do not know when you change your mailing address. So what you have to do is you have to let us know that you're changing your mailing address. In fact, you also need to let us know if you change your location address. So we really depend on you to keep us informed, okay? I cannot tell you in the office how many trays of mail we get back on a monthly basis where we've sent out different things to taxpayers that have changed an address and left no forwarding address. This is very frustrating, to be quite honest with you, but it's also not efficient. So if it's not efficient, what's happening here is that we are um, spending the government's money to do things that we really shouldn't have to do. Our business owners need to be helping us out on that and making sure. And we'll talk about this later on too. But opening a business is very important, but so is closing. When you get ready to close your business, we'll talk some about that a little bit later there as well. Okay, too. And then you see this little red exclamation point down here that's really important. Just note that a business's location address can't be a post office box. So if you happen to use a U.S. post office box or a mailing box at one of these other stores, maybe some sort of UPS store or some other store that offers mailbox services, do not use that as a location address. That's not a valid location. Okay. We need your actual place where your books and records are located. Okay. Very good. I know that we've had a lot of questions come up, and our folks are trying to answer your questions as they've come up. And we're going to be getting to some. Someone asked a franchise and excise question. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later. We're not ready to talk about that yet. Okay. All right. So, Secretary of State, IRS, do you need to register with the Secretary of State? Any corporation, limited partnership, LLC, or business trust, chartered or organized doing business in Tennessee must, it says must, register with the Secretary of State and file annual reports. There's a little link here for more info here, but what that basically means is that if you go to the Secretary of State's website, you'll find information about filing these annual reports. And they are required, and there's a fee involved for each annual report every year. Sometimes people think all I've got to do is file the Secretary of State annual report. I don't owe the franchise and excise tax. Well, yes, you do. So you do need to register with the Secretary of State, and you need to also receive a franchise and excise tax account with us as well. Along those same lines with the IRS, do you need an employer identification number from the IRS? You do need one if you're setting up an account that is not a sole proprietorship or a single member LLC. We can use social security numbers on those. Now, if you do have employees, the IRS is going to make you have an employer identification number because you have to issue W-2 forms to your employees and withhold payroll taxes and things like that at the federal level. So that's an IRS thing, right? So just know that that is the situation there too. Okay. All right. So we talked a little bit about start dates earlier, and when do you start a business? Okay. So like this bullet says here, the effective business start date is the date the state tax obligation begins. So if you started with the Secretary of State prior to register with the Department of Revenue, you're going to use your effective date of the charter with Secretary of State. Okay. And then I mentioned here too, in this blue box, if a sales tax account is set up before a business opens, this monthly filing or whatever period you're set up on, you generally it's monthly, it's still required by the 20th of the next month, even if there's no sales. So you're going to have to file that zero sales tax return, even if you have no sales. Because if you don't, you're going to get an assessment notice from us for the hundreds of dollars that you do not owe us. All we need you to do is to file the return and make the required payment if there is a required payment. Okay. All right. I'm plowing on through here, guys. I know you guys are popping up with some chat questions, and I don't really have a way to respond to those. I'm going to let our folks do those individually with you too. Also, at the end of this, if we don't get to your particular questions or you think about other questions, we're going to tell you how to get in touch with us so we can address every single question you've got today. Okay? No problem at all. Somebody just asked a question. Do I have to file a sales tax monthly report even if I don't collect sales tax? Yes, that is what the blue box says. Okay, cool. All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on. All right, so a couple of other weird things that we have as part of registration is the NAICS code, which is a fancy name, is North American Industry Classification System. Holy mackerel. So the federal government likes to collect data, as you can imagine, on a lot of different things, but also, you know, for the economy and tracking things in our economy and where things are going, it's important that all agencies, including state tax agencies, use this common set of codes. So when you register with us, when you classify your business or you select that code, what we need you to do is to select the correct code when you register with us. And if you want to read more information about that, you can go to census.gov/NAICS, and you can read about that. It's sort of boring, to be honest with you, but at the same time, we just basically want everybody to know that that getting that code correct is important. We want to try to do that so that we help gather data correctly too. So probably even more important than that is this discussion about your fiscal year. Okay, your fiscal year is also known as the tax year, and for most people, you're going to use a calendar year. Okay, so it's really pretty easy because whatever year you use for the Internal Revenue Service for at the federal level is what you're going to use for state tax purposes as it relates to franchise and excise tax. So most businesses will use January 1 through December 31 with the tax return due, what, April 15th every year, right? So that would be the same sort of thing for franchise and excise tax. And we're going to assume your calendar year unless you select a different fiscal year end, which, as you can see there in that second bullet under that heading, it talks about your fiscal year being 12 consecutive months ending on the last day of a month. That's any month that's except for December. So there are different businesses that choose different fiscal years. Probably a good example you can think of is a seasonal business. Like, let's say that you operate a swimming pool or something like that. Well, if you have a swimming pool, generally at the 1st of September, that's pretty much the end of the swimming season, right? So you might have a September 30th ending year, the end of September. So you can go ahead and close your books out and begin a new tax year starting in October. That makes perfect sense. But you would want to make sure to do that at the same, at the federal level as well. Okay. So in other words, we follow what you do at the federal level. Okay, so that's very important to know there too. And then the final thing here on this particular slide is to identify the directors and officers and shareholders of your business. Okay, so when you set up your registration with us, we're going to ask you for names and addresses and things like that, and phone numbers and everything too. It's really important to let us know about that too. And if you have any changes, let us know about those as well. Okay. Because when we have issues or we have questions or something, it's really easy to look on our tax system and say, I'm going to call them and fix this problem, and we're glad to do it. We're in the help business, believe it or not. We're not in the assessment and collections business, although we have to do that. That's part of our job, but we're actually out there to try to help you up front. But we can't help you properly if you don't give us all the information that we need and keep it up to date. Okay, so that's what we want to do, um, is to go ahead and get this information taken care of up front and also continually updated. All right. Well, here we go. You thought you knew it all, but yet there's more. Okay, so um, there's also other stuff to think about here too. Like I say, if you're a new business owner and you're looking at this list and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, really?" Yeah, it's kind of like that. So there's a lot of different things. Some of the stuff we've already talked about, like the federal employer ID number, the EIN number, and all that too. Business licensing, Mitch is going to talk about that in here in just a few moments. But unemployment insurance. If you have a business, you've got to set up an account with the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development. Super important to do that or to do that correctly. Professional licenses, I was looking at that on the slide there. Those are obtained at the Department of Commerce and Insurance. It only applies to certain professions like contractors. If you're a contractor, you probably already know that. Different other businesses like insurance agents and stuff like that There's plenty of other weird ones out there too that require a professional license. Alcohol, huge. And we've done webinars already that are posted on our website about alcohol taxes and things of that nature. Um, we want folks to understand that that is a big old bear too. And the Alcoholic Beverage Commission has a lot of information on their website too. You have to be bonded with us. We have to require a bond to set up in case you do not pay your taxes properly and things of that nature. But in bold at the bottom, Katie has put tax accounts with the Tennessee Department of Revenue. That's really what we're here to talk about today. And then, of course, most businesses are going to need some sort of tax account. Not every business, believe it or not, but a lot of businesses are. And then we're going to talk about some exceptions as well as we move along today here too. So anyway, I know I've done a lot of talking here, but I know that you guys have asked a lot of questions in chat, and I see that our staff is responding to those, and I appreciate that very much. So I'll keep going. Step number 3, we're getting through these steps one by one here. So now that you've sort of thought about your business, you kind of got things going and kind of figuring out what you're doing, you're going to start setting up tax accounts with us. So we're going to talk about some of the main accounts here too. So the first one is business tax, which again, Mitch will talk about in a few moments. If you have any business within your home local county, and if you're actually in a city as well, you'll be getting a business tax license with them too. And all businesses, with a few exceptions, all businesses that sell goods or services are going to pay the state business tax. One of the differences between that and sales tax, which we'll talk about, is that services are subject to business tax. A lot of services are, okay? Not every service, but a lot. But in sales tax, almost no services are subject to tax, just a very few. Okay. And we'll be discussing that a little bit later as well. So if you have any location in your county or city where you're conducting your business, you're going to have that as your home location. And I won't step on Mitch's toes on that. He's going to go through all that information in a little bit. Now, for sales tax, it applies to the retail sale of tangible personal property, and that is property that is actually at for sale by your business. Okay. And then also certain services. I mentioned just a few services are subject to sales tax in Tennessee. And of course, one really important thing here is it says the seller is liable for remitting the tax. So when you register for sales tax, it's your responsibility as the seller or the dealer to remit this tax back to us. If you don't do that, then it will come down on you. And you're thinking, well, I didn't collect it from my customer, that so I don't owe it. No, that's not the way it works. You're supposed to report your sales, and the law makes you responsible to remit that tax. Okay, we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Now, the franchise and excise tax applies to the corporations or certain limited partnerships, LLCs, business trusts, chartered or registered or doing businesses in Tennessee. Um, the that's basically who that applies to. So it does not apply to sole proprietors. We talked about that before. Also, general partnerships, it does not apply to them as well. Um, so for other taxes, liquor by the drink, tire tax, tobacco taxes, the list goes on and on. Those are all listed on our website. So, you might go through that. If you have any specific questions about the nature of your business or whatever, you can ask that in chat, or you can refer to some of the resources we'll have at the very end of our presentation today as well. Okay. So my old saying is, for every tax law, there's some sort of exemption out there. And I truly believe it. So exemptions include exemptions for business tax for manufacturers, churches, charities that are selling donated items, and some services are actually not subject to business tax. And Mitch will tell you more about it in a few minutes on that. There are some certain exemptions under sales tax laws for certain groups or entities, certain products, and then certain exemptions based on the use of the items, which we'll be discussing a little later as well. And so for franchise and excise tax, there are 17 types of exemptions available. And there's a bunch of information on our website about that, on franchise and excise tax. And we're going to be talking about exemptions a little bit later as well. Okay. All right. So for TinTap, TinTap is our portal. It's our website that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about in resources a little bit later. Um, this is where you get your business registered. This is where you obtain your tax accounts. This is where you actually file the tax returns. This is where you actually make your payments. Okay. And when you close your business, you're going to close it by using the TinTap system. And we want you to do that actually on the system for us, and we hope that you are able to get that done. And if not, if you go out on TinTap and there's something you don't understand and it's during our regular business day, just call us. We'll be sharing our phone number again with you, which is 615-253-0600. Again, 615-253-0600. And again, we'll give you all this information later, but just call us. Say, hey, I'm stuck. I can't do this. I don't know what to do. Help me. We'll help you. We surely will. Or you can send us an email and we'll be glad to help you too. We'll share our email address a little later as well. Well, with that, I think my intro part here is done. And I'd like to turn the presentation over now to Mr. Mitch Gibson. Mitch, hello there. Good morning to you, sir.
Hi, Billy. Can you hear me okay?
Well, I can hear you just fine. I think everybody else can too.
Okay, good deal.
I think we've overwhelmed them with touch, or I don't know what I say touch for. What am I talking about? Too much information this morning, but I think that you'll be able to piece them through on business tax here, which is sort of its own baby of information. So I'll let you take over there, Mitch. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And Billy, real quick, do I have control over the slide to shift to the next slide?
Yes, sir. You are ready to rock and roll. You can try that, and I think you did.
Awesome. All right.
Very
well,
good.
Hello, everyone. Again, I just want to echo a lot of what Billy has already said to you. We're going to be trying to answer as many questions as we can in the chats. Of course, if we don't get to your question, do not be concerned. We're going to give you guys some information on how you can reach out to us at the Department of Revenue a little later, either by phone or through chat or by sending us a message electronically. We'll go over that a little later. So just in case if we don't get to your question, don't be concerned. So we're going to talk about business tax. If you'll see on the slide that you're currently looking at, this is just an overview of business tax. If you'll notice, each word that is underlined, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about what that word means. And so essentially what we're going to be covering for business tax is essentially what is business tax? Essentially, it is a tax for businesses that is based on gross receipts of sales and services. Okay. Now, the rate at which you pay the business tax, that rate is calculated based off of the classification of business license that you have, as well as if you are filing as a retailer or a wholesaler. Again, we're gonna dig a little deeper into these underlined words a little later in the presentation. There's also a couple of deductions and credits that may be available to you that will offset the tax liability that you owe. Again, we're going to go over some of those deductions and credits a little later. Registration. So who is required to register for business tax? Essentially, any entity that has a standard business license is required to register business tax. We'll get into business licenses a little later. Also, who may be required is any out-of-state businesses that have a nexus in Tennessee. Again, we're going to get into nexus a little later. And then some entities and services, as Billy mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, are exempt from business tax. There's a couple of categories that would exempt a business from business tax. We're going to kind of go over a little bit of that information. Filing. So this is probably one of the more common questions that we get from taxpayers is, when is business tax due? To keep it simple, it is due on the 15th day of the 4th month of whatever the business's fiscal year end is. Okay, so just to give an example, most of our businesses have a fiscal year end of December. Okay, so the 15th day of the 4th month, that would be April 15th. That is a pretty busy time for us at the Department of Revenue. And so if you seek any assistance from us during April, we ask that you try to be patient, as we just have a lot of taxpayers that are trying to file multiple returns, and business taxes is one of those returns. But the due date for business tax, if you have a December fiscal year end, your due date will always be April 15th. Okay. There's a minimum tax due per license or per location that is reflected on the business tax return. Okay. So even if you file a $0 return, that minimum tax due is always going to be $22. All right. And then also the business licenses that you have, they have expiration dates on them. The expiration date is the 15th day of the month after the tax due date. So if we're going back on that example that I just said, if you have a December fiscal year end and your due date is April 15th, the expiration date of your license will be May 15th. Okay. I think the main reason why this is done is it provides a little bit of a soft landing for whenever you file your return, and it allows you enough time to actually receive your new business license. And so you have, if you file right on April 15th by the due date, you have about 4 weeks before the clerk can send you your new license and you can receive it. And that's plenty enough time for you to actually receive a copy of that new license, and you can get rid of your old expired one. And so that's just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be covering. Business tax and licensing overview. So when it comes to licensing, I think I saw a question in the chat a little earlier about licensing, and someone was asking about $10,000, if they're required to register if they make less than $10,000. This slide is for you. So when being required to register, or when being required to get a license, one of the main things you want to figure out is what your sales threshold is. Okay, so if you're looking at this slide, you'll notice all of the different, there's 3 different thresholds for your gross sales. And so if you are a business that have gross sales under $3,000 for your fiscal year, then no business license is required. Okay, and you'll probably notice that business tax is also not required for these taxpayers. And there's also no renewal because you're not getting a license, so there's nothing to renew. Essentially, this is probably deemed as more of a hobby, and so there's just no requirement to file. Now, if your threshold goes over $3,000, but it is under $10,000, then you may be only required to get a minimal business license, or a minimal activity business license. If you'll notice, the business tax is not required for minimal activity business licenses, so you don't have to file a return through the Department of Revenue. all of these licenses are dealt with directly with the clerk. Okay, so if you find yourself, you're never going to gross 10,000 or more. You're always going to be under that $10,000 threshold, but you're always going to generate more than 3,000. You may just need to get a minimal activity license, and those are all handled directly through the clerk. You would not deal with the Department of Revenue for that license and that renewal at all. Now, if you find yourself over $10,000 in gross sales, then you would be required to apply for a standard business license. This is when business tax is required. So you would file a return reporting that gross sales amount of whatever you made for each location on your return. And the renewal process, which we're going to get into, when you file that return through our system, which is TINTAP, and you pay that tax to us, our system notifies the clerk of wherever you have that license, and they just issue you a brand new license. Some clerks will push the licenses directly to TINTAP for you to print. Other clerks mail out the licenses. Okay, so it really just depends on the clerk that you have a license through. But most important part is those sales thresholds. Okay, so when determining if you need a license or not, the number one thing that you're going to want to make sure that you're correct on is what those sales thresholds are. If you'll notice at the bottom of this current slide, we're going to get a little bit more information to you about special rates for contractors and out-of-state businesses pertaining to this. They're treated a little differently, and so we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay. So the business license process it can be a little confusing when you're starting out as a new business. But to keep it simple, we have created this graphic just to sort of show you the flow of all of the things that are done in helping taxpayers receive a brand new license. And so if we start out at the top left, you'll see that you are the business and you apply for a business license. When you apply for that business license through the clerk, whether that be a county clerk or city clerk, that clerk, once you get that license, will import that data to us, the Tennessee Department of Revenue, and it creates your business tax account. Okay, and this is assuming that you have a standard business license. Again, minimal activities, we don't you don't have to work with us to renew those. This is just for standard licenses. But when you get that standard license, they import that data to our system and it creates a business tax account. Okay. Once you have that business tax account, as the years go by, you will have filing requirements. Okay. And once you file the returns and make the payments due based off of the return that you file, our system shares that data with the clerks. And so our systems are communicating with the clerks every single day, every single week, every single month, depending on what fiscal year end certain businesses have. And if you have filed all returns and made all payments on your business tax and you are current, then our system notifies the clerk that that business is clear to receive the most up-to-date business license. Okay. And that process essentially happens every single year. Okay. And so if you ever, find yourself having an expired license and you can't remember if you renewed it or not, or if you got a new one or whatever, the main thing that you're going to want to check is to see if you filed those returns. If you filed those returns and made those payments, then you probably are due to get a brand new business license for that specific location. Okay. So, and then also, if you notice at the bottom, it says issues tax clearance or tax delinquencies. Tax delinquencies are a scary word, but essentially, if a taxpayer has not filed a return by the due date, so in this case, let's say your due date is April 15th and you're filing business tax, but you didn't get your return filed on time, our system will send out what's called a notice of proposed assessment. And it has an estimated amount due on here. And I actually saw a couple of questions that may have pertained to this earlier in the chat. And so that's why I wanted to address it. So the notice of proposed assessment will have an estimated amount due. We get a lot of taxpayers that are scared or nervous that they have to make that payment but the key word is estimated. It's just estimated. It's not actually what is owed. That is the amount that our collections division will collect on until we receive a return from the business. Okay, so if you do receive a tax delinquency notice of proposed assessment, that just means that you probably have a return that you haven't filed yet. And the amount that you will owe will be dependent on those gross sales that you report. And you'll need to do that before you get your license. Okay. Moving on. So wholesaler versus retailers. Again, if you remember from the first slide, the tax rate that will be due when you file your return, it's dependent on one of two things. The first was classification, which we'll get into that. But the second part was whether you're filing as a retailer or a wholesaler. Okay. And there's a difference between the two. So wholesaler, you may be a wholesaler if more than 50% of your taxable gross sales are wholesale sales. So what are wholesale sales? Essentially, they are a sale to a retailer who plans to resell those items. Okay. A sale of materials that become part of a product that is for resale, or a sale of goods to the government or governmental agency or to a nonprofit. Okay, so before you file your return, you want to make sure that you are determining if you are a wholesaler. And a lot of it, if you're engaged in both wholesale, retail sales, it depends on which one generates the most amount of sales. Okay, so more than 50%, that's what's going to define whether you're a wholesaler or not. Retail sales, they're essentially any retail sale that's anything that is not a wholesale sale. Okay. And then, of course, the same thing, at least 50% or more of your taxable gross sales are retail sales, then you would be a retailer. Also, at the very bottom of this slide, you'll notice we have a link here. We just started this actually just a couple of days ago, January 1, 2023, where we are sending out wholesale or retail certificates. Okay. So that link is to an important notice that our department sent out back in May of 2022. And it's just one page. It's not anything that's super long to read. And so recommend all of you to visit that and just take a look at it. Essentially what it covers is we, the department, are going to be sharing certificates based off of what you filed as on your previous tax return. So whether you're a wholesaler or a retailer. And these are going to be made available to you in TINTAP. And you're going to have one for each location that you are registered for in the state of Tennessee. Okay. So if you have a tax return and let's say you have 4 locations and you filed all of them as retailer, you're going to receive 4 certificates that say all 4 of these locations were filed as a retailer. Okay. And why this is important is some vendors may request for these certificates. Okay. They may request a copy. And that is just for their records to ensure that, the sales that they are selling to you are being sold, for the right purposes. And so if you have any additional questions, I recommend throw your questions in the chat, but also visit that important notice. It goes into great detail about that specific thing that we are just now starting this month.
Hey, Mitch.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Billy. Go ahead.
Can I interrupt you for a second? So we had someone, go back to your previous slide if you don't mind. Someone, or actually a few people in chat, have been talking about the difference between wholesaler and retailer. So maybe we just need to talk for a quick second about, what's the difference? What does that mean? And I can tell you what I think. And first of all, I'd say easy. A retailer is somebody that sells something to the end user, and a wholesaler is somebody that sells something to another person so that they can resell it. What do you think about that, Mitch?
No, I think that that's the most simplistic way to look at it. And who is the end user? Are you selling your products to the end user of that product? If you are, then you're the retailer. But if you are selling the items and those items are being the intended purpose of those are to be resold to their customers, then that could potentially be that probably fall in the category of being a wholesale sale. And so I think that that's a really, really good way to approach how to dictate what certain sales are. I appreciate that, Billy. That's a good
Right.
point.
And just one thing too on these certificates that you mentioned here earlier, it is a new thing, and you'll start seeing these pop out on the 10 tap system. Just understand that these wholesale resale certificates are not business licenses. They are not. That's a different animal. So sometimes the business licenses do show up on 10 tap if the clerks approve them to go out there. So you'll see those listed separately than these certificates. Yeah.
Right. And just, I'm not entirely, I have not seen what this looks like in TinTap yet. I believe the certificates are probably going to be just found under the letters section,
Mhm.
I would assume. In
Probably
TinTap,
so.
whereas your licenses, there's an entirely different section where business licenses can be viewed. And so just be aware of that for anyone who is familiar with navigating TinTap. They, hopefully that will be clear.
Thank you, Mitch.
No, thank you. So again, as I said earlier, we're going to define each of those keywords that were underlined. And one of the first ones was gross sales. So business tax, that is based off of the total gross sales for each location. And so what is gross sales? Gross sales are defined as all sales derived from products and services that the business is engaged in. Okay. So all sales, along with any exemptions or deductions, those must be reported on the business tax return for each location that is registered. All right. And so, as I said earlier, if you have, 5 different locations for your business, you would break those gross sales and make sure that you're reporting them per location. All right. And that gross sales amount is very important because it's going to dictate how much is owed to renew those business licenses. All right. And again, if you have zero gross sales, then and you just want to continue maintaining a business license, you would still owe. It would just be that minimum $22. Okay, so just remember that when you're filing your business tax returns this coming year. So, who is subject to business tax? Specifically, when it comes to Nexus, we get a lot of questions pertaining to Nexus. Out-of-state entities are subject to business tax if they meet Nexus in Tennessee. A good way to sort of understand what Nexus is, it's a bridge, it's a connection. And so we have a couple of criteria that defines what that nexus, what that connection, what that bridge would be for the state of Tennessee, specifically for out-of-state entities. And so if you're organized or commercially domiciled in Tennessee, that could generate a nexus in the state for business tax. If you own or use any capital in the state of Tennessee, that could potentially generate nexus. If you have a Brightline presence in Tennessee, and this sort of breaks down what Brightline means. If your gross receipts are more than $500,000 or 25% of total receipts in Tennessee, that can generate a nexus. If any property that is owned, real property, tangible personal property, and it resides in Tennessee, if it's more than 50,000 or 25% of total property by value in Tennessee, that could generate a nexus. And then, of course, payroll. So compensation to your employees. If it's more than 50,000 or if it's 25% of compensation is paid in Tennessee, then that can create an excess as well. And of course, out-of-state entities with $10,000 or more. And again, this is different from that slide when I broke down the thresholds. This is for out-of-state entities. Okay, so out-of-state entities with 10,000 plus in sales or that have nexus, they register directly with the state. Okay, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Something else that dictates the rate for business tax, again, it was the wholesaler versus retailer, but this thing called classifications is very, very important. And so a classification is essentially the thing that defines the dominant business activity for each location. Okay. And so whenever you apply for your business license, it's important that you know what your dominant business activity is, whichever activity generates the most sales. That is going to be your dominant business activity, and that will inform what business tax classification your business license will have. Okay. So dominant business activity is defined as the business activity that is the major or principal source of the taxable gross sales. Okay. So what generates the majority of your sales? Whatever that is, whatever that activity is, that is your dominant business activity. We get a lot of questions from taxpayers saying, well, technically I do 3 different things. You can't have 3 different classifications for one location. So we just say which one generates the majority of the sales for the location. That's going to be the dominant business activity. In other words, the business classification is based on the activity that generates the largest portion of the business taxable sales. Here's a couple of examples with each classification broken down. And so you have class 1 that's broken into 5 subcategories. You have 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, and 1E. And this gives a couple of examples of the types of business activities that would fall into these classifications. You have the class 2s. Class 2s are sort of known as the catch-all. It's for all tangible personal property not specifically listed in any other classification. You're probably going to be a class 2. We have class 3s, which is this is specific tangible personal property that is being sold by certain businesses. So if you see your business listed there, then you would be a class 3. Class 4 is predominantly for any contractors, anyone engaged in installing tangible personal property, providing exterminating services, selling livestock, poultry, farm products, receiving commissions from the sale of farm products. And so if you're engaged in any of those activities, you would be a class 4, which again, we're going to get into contractors a little bit later and some of those sales thresholds. And then of course we have a class 5 that's broken into 2 different subcategories. We have 5A and 5B. And so that's sort of an overview of what each classification entails. We also have a very helpful link on our website that breaks down the classifications. Google is one of the main tools that I use. If you Google TN revenue classifications, it's going to take you to a link that will break down a lot of this information for you. And so, utilize our website as much as possible if you're unsure about what classification to use, because we probably have the answer there, which we'll get into resources a little bit later, and I'll try to show you guys where you can locate that information. As we mentioned earlier, there's numerous services that are exempt from business tax. We have 16 different categories. This is just an overview of what those services are. We're not going to go into each one. Again, we have this information on our website. We have what's called help desk articles that break this down and provide you references to the Tennessee code that have this listed. But if you fall within one of these categories, then you may be exempt from business tax. So right off the bat, accounting, auditing, and bookkeeping, those services are exempt from business tax. And like I said, that's just one category. That's one example. And so so that's good. If you find yourself on that list, then that's one less thing that you have to worry about. Contractors. So as we mentioned earlier, class 4 contractors, their sales threshold is a little different. And this is because they're going to be doing business in multiple different jurisdictions, or potentially will be doing business in multiple different jurisdictions. Okay. And the sales threshold for them to get a license is a little different. So receipts of more than $50,000 in any jurisdiction. Registration and license are required for both the city and the county. Okay. And applies to both in-state and out-of-state contractors. So if you're a contractor, you're a class 4 business license, and let's say you generate $50,000 in one city, you generate 70,000 in another city, and you generate 100,000 in an entirely different city. You're probably going to have 6 different licenses in that scenario because you're generating over 50,000 in each of those cities, which each of those cities are located in a county. Okay. So you'd have a city and county for each of those jurisdictions. And you would, when it comes time for you to file your return, you would report those gross sales per the jurisdiction that you're reporting on. Okay. For in-state contractors, receipts of 50,000 or less in a jurisdiction, no additional license is required other than the license where you are domiciled. Okay, so if you're a class 4 contractor, but you're an in-state contractor, meaning you are sourced in Tennessee, you're a Tennessee business, you only have to have a license for that domiciled location. And you do not have to get another license in another jurisdiction unless you generate $50,000 or more. Okay. Out-of-state contractors, receipts of $10,000 to $50,000 in a county, you must pay the state business tax. Okay, so what that means is you wouldn't get a license through the clerk, but you would register that location with us, the Department of Revenue, and you would report those sales on your return. You just wouldn't have a license involved. Okay, so that's a little bit of information. Again, we have this information broken down on our website as well, and we have a very helpful revenue help desk article that breaks down the sales thresholds for business tax contractors specifically. Okay. We've got a couple of miscellaneous items pertaining to business tax. These are a couple of questions that we get quite often. Food trucks must be licensed for business tax in the jurisdiction where that truck is domiciled in. Okay, so food truck tends to move, it's mobile, but when answering the question of, where do I need to get a business license? We really want them to get a business license where they're primarily domiciled in. Okay, so food trucks must display their license when selling in other jurisdictions. And if a food truck remains in a fixed location outside of its domiciled location for over 180 days, then a license would be required for that other jurisdiction as well. Okay, so if you find yourself wanting to open up a food truck, just know that whatever you register your business location as, your domiciled location, you just have to have a license for that location and you'll report all sales through that. However, if you are, if you take your food truck to a location that's outside of your domiciled jurisdiction and it's over 180 days, then that's when you're going to want to look into getting a license for that jurisdiction as well. Short-term rental properties. I think I saw 2 or 3 questions pertaining to short-term rental properties earlier. So short-term rental is defined as 180 consecutive days or less of vacation lodging, including a person's home. Those sales are subject to business tax. Okay, if it exceeds 180 days, then it's no longer considered short-term rental based off the definition that we use. So if you are in the business of engaging your clients and you're in your primary business activity is short-term rentals, you are liable for business tax. So you just need 1 business license per jurisdiction, okay, regardless of how many properties are in that jurisdiction. All right, so a good example is Gatlinburg. There's a lot of short-term rentals in Gatlinburg, a lot of cabins that can be rented, and a business may have 4 or 5 cabins in Sevierville. They only have to have 1 business license, even if they have multiple properties within that jurisdiction. Okay, so if you are in the business of short-term rentals and you have multiple properties in one jurisdiction, you just have to have 1 license for that jurisdiction. Let's see, multiple rentals, yep. For business tax, gross sales from all properties within a jurisdiction are reported on the return. Okay, so whatever your gross receipts were from that short-term rental, that is what would be reported on the business tax return. If you have multiple properties in one jurisdiction, you would just add all of those gross sales together, all of those gross receipts, and that would be what you would report for that particular jurisdiction when it comes time for you to file your business tax return. Also note rental sales made through Airbnb, VRBO, etc., should also be included in the business tax gross sales. Okay, so if you have any, which Billy, I know he's going to cover sales tax. Sales tax is a little different when it comes to Airbnb specifically, but when it comes to business tax, those sales must be included on your on your business tax return when you file that return. Okay. So just be aware of that. As mentioned earlier, there's a couple of deductions and credits that can be claimed on the business tax return. Some of these are known as common exclusions, maybe persons making casual or isolated sales. Manufacturers, those are common exclusions. A couple of common deductions that can be claimed on the return are trading allowances, amounts paid to subcontractors. So if you are a class 4 contractor and you subcontract a job to someone, you would still report those sales on your gross sales amount, but then you would deduct out those sales on the deductions portion of the return, because that subcontractor should probably have a license and they're going to be reporting their gross sales. So we want to avoid any gross sales from being taxed twice. Okay, so if you're a class 4 contractor and you hire subcontractors for various jobs, know that you can claim those subcontractors as a deduction. Okay. Sales of services derived to customers out of the state of Tennessee. So if you have any customers that are not Tennessee customers, they are located elsewhere, those can be claimed as deductions as well. Again, you'll report it in your gross sales amount on line 1, but then you will claim it as a deduction in the deductions portion of the return. Sales of tangible personal property, interstate commerce, again, just anything that is sold to a customer that is outside of the state of Tennessee, you can claim that as a deduction. Any bad debts, which our return actually gives, I think it breaks down a couple of examples of what bad debts entail. And so I recommend you check out the instructions portion of the business tax return. That's on our website as well. I believe it breaks down and defines a little bit about what bad debts can be used on the deductions portion of the return. And a common credit that can be used towards business tax is any personal property tax that is owned within the state. And so when you're filing your return, you can claim approximately 50% of the amount owed on business tax. There's a place where you can report that amount, but it will never take you below the minimum of $22. Okay, so if you file a $0 return and you have personal property tax to report, even if you added on the return, it's not going to go below $22. You're still going to owe that minimum $22. And also the property must be at the location for the return where it's being filed. Okay, so we get a couple of questions pertaining to the credits that are allowed on the return. Just to reiterate when the business tax is due. So again, it's the 15th day of the 4th month following the fiscal year end. So again, if your fiscal year end is December, your due date is April 15th. Now, if the due date falls on a weekend or on a holiday, then it just extends to the next business day. Okay, so just be aware of that. And again, the business license expiration date, it's the 15th of the month after the tax due date. So if your tax due date's April 15th, your license probably expires May 15th. And there is no option for a filing extension when it comes to business tax. So just be aware of that. And I think that concludes business tax. I think Billy is going to take over sales tax, if I am correct.
Yes, I will, but excuse me. Sorry about that. I am going to tell folks that we are right on time, believe it or not, for our break. So I'm assuming that your heads have not exploded yet between the information that Mitch and I have given you this morning and the folks that we have been able to help through chat. We appreciate it too. So we will take a break. I would like to tell you guys, thank you for giving us so many great questions in our chat. But I will tell you, you got us outnumbered. We got 6 of us and 312 of you. So guess who wins? That's you. So we're not going to be able to touch everybody's question, and we apologize on that. But I will tell you again for sure, we're going to tell you how to get your questions answered. You will get your question answered. You may have to send us an email, give Mitch's bunch a call in the call center. We're going to get you taken care of. You're going to be able to know what's going on. Okay. So let's take a break. See you back here at 10 o'clock Central Time, and we'll kick off sales tax at that point. Thank you very much, everybody. Well, welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your break. Lots of information here so far that we've gone through on lots of different tax topics today, and hope that we've been helpful. We know that despite our best efforts, I'm sure that you've got lots more questions. So I did put a little link out there in the chat there for you to be able to find our phone number and our email address there too, regarding regarding how to get in touch with us on some specific issues. And we're going to share that again a little bit later too. But now it's time to talk about sales tax. Remember, in the very first of our presentation, we talked about the fact that sales tax was sort of the big dog, the 58% of what we collect at the Department of Revenue coming from sales tax. So it's very important to us. So let's talk about this for the next little bit here and get going. And of course, we still have our staff available here to help you in chat as we're able to with several hundred people still on board with us during today's presentation. So let's talk about sales tax basics here for just a second. In Tennessee, sales tax is based on sales made by dealers. And dealers are defined in tax law as people who are engaged in the business of making sales of taxable products, or in some cases, some services in Tennessee that are subject to these taxes. So on this slide here, it talks about this and the sales of tangible personal property, that's TPP in this graphic here. They're normally taxable unless they have a particular exemption, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Um, and they're taxable, excuse me, they're exempt, as it says in the middle of the slide, if the purchase is made by an exempt entity, like somebody who is going to resell the product, or a nonprofit that happens to be using it for their use and consumption or to give away. Um, the products, sometimes some products are exempt. Like there's certain healthcare products that are exempt under our law. They're just always exempt. So that's because the state legislature wants them to be exempt, so they are. And then of course, usage, like manufacturers, if you're producing a product in a manufacturing environment, you can obtain your industrial machinery free of sales tax if you're using it for manufacturing, and you have to apply and get approval for that. It's a very intricate procedure, but you can do that, and we have the ability to do that. Now for services, as we said before, they are not taxable unless they're specifically listed in the law. Now, we've listed here several of the taxable services that are listed in the law, like the repair or installation or cleaning of tangible personal property. So if you get a car repaired, like I got repaired yesterday and spent hundreds of dollars, so good luck for me on that. Happy 2023, right? But at any rate, I had to pay sales tax on the parts, and I had to pay sales tax on the labor, which is exactly right. That's what the law calls for. Um, and then, of course, computer software is located in here as well. Lodging services, if I go to a hotel and I rent a room for a night or two, I've got to pay sales tax on that. Other types of things like parking and storage, etc. So again, this list is very short. It's in our law. But if you're just selling a service, unless it's a listed service here, it's pretty much not subject to sales tax unless it's connected with the sale of tangible personal property. Okay, so that's a real basic term there, and I hope that that's helpful to you. So let's talk about sales price. So sales price is defined in Tennessee law as the cost of the property sold and materials used. And it mentions in the law these different things you see on this slide here too. Anything that's involved in what you're charging that customer. We get a question a lot about these transportation costs, the incoming freight charges. Those, if those are charged to the customer on the sale of that tangible personal property, they're subject to sales tax as well. any taxes imposed on the seller or any expenses, charges for any services necessary to complete the sale. Delivery, that's a big thing nowadays. You know, if you're charging to deliver that taxable product, that's taxable. Okay. And of course, installation, which we mentioned earlier too. So these are all things that are tied up into the definition of sales price, things for you to consider. Okay. So we'll talk about the rates now for just a second. The general state sales tax rate in Tennessee is 7% on tangible personal property or taxable services. So 7% is that state rate. Now for food, and food is defined in our law, food and food ingredients, is 4%, and that's the state rate too. Now here's where it gets a little bit more complicated in this third bullet. What it says here is that any county or incorporated city can levy a local sales and use tax on these privileges, and the local sales tax rate may not be higher than 2.75%. And so many of the cities and counties across Tennessee have chosen to have as much as 2.75% local tax added on to these sales. Okay. So, like in Rutherford County, where I'm located, this is 9.75 for most things I buy. So that's 7% plus the 2.75. So that's very typical, you know. It's a little different in different other places. I think the lowest rate of sales tax I believe that we still have in Tennessee is 1.5%. So that's pretty cheap and very uncommon. So 2.5, 2.25, 2.75% are very typical here too. Now, what we do in Tennessee is somewhat unique compared to some other states. Some other states that charge sales tax have businesses actually file local sales tax returns to the local governments and state to the state governments. But what we do in Tennessee is we collect everything and then we send the local tax back to the local government. We keep an extremely small percentage of what we take in for them for administrative costs, but most of that money does go back to the local governments, and that way they don't have to deal with the processing and record keeping of that. So that's a good thing there too. Now, the fourth bullet down at the bottom of the slide here talks about specified digital products, and that's in law too. So what is a specified digital product? We probably won't talk a lot about that here this morning, but they are defined in the law, and they have a special rate of 7%, but that local rate is actually 2.5%, and it's a flat rate. It doesn't make any difference where you're located in Tennessee. They're always 2.5% because that's what the laws calls for. And again, these laws are passed by the Tennessee State Legislature, changed every year, and we certainly are glad to accommodate their wishes, whatever the legislature has passed and the governor has signed. So anyway, there you go. So now, since we've got all that figured out, let's talk about something else called the state single article tax. So a number of years ago, when maybe budgets were a little bit tighter in Tennessee, um, the state legislature decided that it would be a good idea to collect a little bit more money on big ticket items. So you can see in this graphic here, we use a car as an example, okay? So cars, as you're very well aware, are very expensive, okay? So as you can see here in this graphic, the entire price of this particular car is taxed at the 7% state rate, okay? Now, we mentioned about the local tax rate just a few minutes ago being anywhere from what I think is 1.5%, I think is the low end right now, up to 2.75. But you know what? That only applies to the first 1,600 in most locations in Tennessee, a little lower in a few others. Anyway, 1,600, we'll just say, is subject to the local rate. All right. So with state single article tax, what it says there is hey, from the dollars number 1600 all the way to 3200, the state single article special tax of 2.75% kicks in at that point. So every dollar between 1600 and 3200 has another tax put on it. Since the local tax cut off, the state single article tax kicks in at the 2.75% flat rate for that next little bit. Now, after 3,200, you notice there's a blank area. There's no more state single article tax. So your first 1,600 local, your next 1,600 single article, everything 7%. Okay. I hope that makes sense to you, because for a long time, when I started with the Department of Revenue a long time ago, it took me a long time to figure that out. So don't feel bad if that's hard for you, because it's a little bit difficult to navigate there. But if you have that problem, then don't feel bad. We can talk you through it if you need some help with it. Okay, that's single article tax. So let's talk about resale certificates for just a minute, because this is super important. So, like it says in bold here, if a purchaser is also a retailer, buys something with the intent to resell and presents a valid resale certificate, no sales tax is owed. That's awesome. So, if you are buying products for your business and you are trying to stock your store and get things going, things like that, you want to use your resale certificate, because you don't want to have to pay sales tax on those products that you're requiring for resale. Okay. So if you are selling to somebody who's buying these products so that they can resell them, make sure you get a copy of their resale certificate, because if someone comes to you from our department and says, hey, you said that you exempted this many people for resale, where's their resale certificate? You want to be able to pull that copy of that out and say, here it is, we're ready to go. And if you don't do that, then you have trouble. Okay, so you don't want to be that person. All right, you want to have all your ducks in a row, so to speak, and get your copy of the resale certificate there too. Now, of course, we recognize the resale certificates that are issued by other states. We'll take copies of those, and you may receive those from out-of-state people, and that's fine. You can exempt those as well. And of course, we're going to issue a certificate of resale to anybody when you register for sales tax, so that you're able to make these purchases for your business. Okay, so they're issued by location. So if you have one or two or three or 9 different locations, you're going to have a different resale certificate for every location, because every location has to be registered separately. Now, this bottom line is really important, and we really haven't got a lot of people that understand this a lot, but it's true. These certificates don't expire, okay? So the resale certificates don't ever expire. So if you get one today for a new business, great. It's good for as long as you're at that location. If you're there 30 years from now, you don't need another one, unless they change the law. But as right now, that's the way that goes. So certificates don't expire for resale. Okay. Guys are chatting away there, and our folks are picking you up as we can. So this is what a resale certificate looks like right here. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit for you. Just to let you know here, we've got the effective dates on here. Again, we talked about earlier today how important it is to make sure you start your business at an appropriate time, because when you're setting up this business, it's telling you again, you've got a resale certificate right here to make purchases intended for subsequent resale. So it's not for your own use, it's for reselling. And you give a copy of this to each of the folks that you're doing business with. So again, important to register properly and to make sure you're using the resale certificate for its intended purpose. Okay. All right. So you can also verify a resale exemption certificate by going out on our TINTAP system and verifying that the information is true and correct. I'll try to zoom in on this too and scroll a little bit for you. Hang on a second. Hopefully you can see that there too. So you type in the type of certificate, which would be resale. There's a little pull down list right over here. And then you type in the number off of it and hit submit, and it'll tell you if it's a valid number or not. And if you have any trouble verifying some of these, maybe with an older certificate or something that doesn't come up exactly, give us a call real quick if it's during the business day, or send us an email and we'll take care of things for you. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about entity-based exemptions. There are some exemptions based on who the purchaser is or what they do. Okay, so some great or examples of this would be with farmers and nursery operators and timber harvesters and people like that. There's a special exemption form for those people, and they actually have to make that application with us. We have to get proof that they are a farmer, that they're operating a nursery, etc. And then once we give them their exemption card or certificate, they can use that to purchase items for agricultural purposes. Similarly, the manufacturers that have an industrial machinery exemption have a similar process that they use. You know, equipment for manufacturing operations can be very expensive. So when they decide to get new equipment, they want to be able to not have to pay sales tax on that equipment. So this is a very valuable exemption, and one that we're glad to help manufacturers with and dot those I's and cross those T's. Governments, like state governments and local, like county and cities and that, they're exempt, but they actually don't have a certificate. They have a fill-in certificate. We have an example on our website of this. We don't actually issue them any sort of official exemption because they're exempt. What you want to do with that, if you get somebody with a local government or the state that wants to buy from you, make sure that they fill out that exemption certificate, that generic form, and that they're paying for it with government funds or using a government credit card, purchase order, check, something like that, because that will protect you as well. And that will further solidify that that is an exempt purchase there too. And then nonprofits, okay? Nonprofits are going to have either an exemption certificate from us, or if they're an out-of-state 501c3 organization, which is a charitable organization identified by the Internal Revenue Service, then they will have a letter from the IRS. So if they're from out of state and they're a 501c3, they don't have to make an application with us. You can take that copy of that letter, and that is okay. All right. But otherwise, the nonprofits here will have their exemption certificates. So typically churches and other charitable organizations will already have this exemption certificate, and they can provide that to you. And of course, again, this is for that organization's use or consumption, or to acquire items that they might give away. It is not for anything that they resell, because if they are reselling something, they may have to pay sales tax on it, because they may be selling it like any other business would sell it. Okay, so that's super important to know, is that that's different for nonprofits. Okay, so again, nonprofits using these things for their own use can get these items free of sales tax. Okay, all right. Now, here's some product-based exemptions that are listed in the Tennessee Code. You've got things like gasoline. Gasoline's not subject to sales tax, it's subject to fuel tax. And that's another one of the gazillion taxes that we have in Tennessee. But it is listed there, and the fuel dealers, wholesalers, they know all about those taxes rather. Textbooks, a textbook either in written form or digitally is not subject to sales tax in Tennessee. Meals at schools, the kids going to school, they don't pay sales tax, anything like that. Some specifically defined healthcare products, which we do have a list on our website that has these different kinds of healthcare products. Some of them are exempt. Okay. They have to meet certain conditions about being considered durable medical equipment, some other things like that. And there's considerations. A little bit hard to discuss in today's presentation, but it's out there. And then, of course, qualifying industrial machinery, research and development stuff, agricultural have to be supported by the certificates. We already talked about that. Just make sure you're keeping copies of all this as a good business owner. Just making sure that you're dotting I's and crossing T's. Again, bookkeeping, very important, right? Okay. So several people already today have asked this question, so we'll hit it again for the whole group. Interstate commerce sales, okay? This goes for business tax too, by the way. So if your sale is originating here in Tennessee, because you're a Tennessee-based business, and the purchaser is going to take possession outside of Tennessee for their use or consumption outside of the state of Tennessee, it's exempt, but you do have to report it. So you're going to report it on the sales tax return, but you're going to exempt it on Schedule A. There's a special line for that so that you can back that back out. But yes, you do report it, but you take it back out. Okay. You do not charge that customer Tennessee sales tax. Now, what's important, it's important in a way, but maybe not to you, but that customer that's in that other state, they may owe tax in their state based on the fact that they receive that item in their state. So that's called use tax. Okay. We have use tax in Tennessee as well. So if you bring items into Tennessee that you have not paid Tennessee sales tax on, you owe use tax on that. And we have a consumer use tax form on our website that's available for you to make a declaration of what you may have brought into Tennessee that has not had Tennessee sales tax paid on it. Okay, so there you go. When to file, super duper important. Okay, so when you need to file your sales tax return, we have to look at what you're registered for. What is your filing frequency is what we call it. Okay. So first of all, it's due on the 20th day of the month that follows the period. Okay. And, it's different for different kinds of taxes. I think Mitch mentioned that business tax is due the 15th day of the fourth month following the end of your tax period. So that's different. But so if you're filing a monthly sales tax return, then it's due by the 20th of the next month. And then, of course, if the 20th falls on a weekend or a holiday, then we give you to the next business day to file and pay as well. And again, is for filing and for payment. Okay. So it's really critical that you get the filing and the payment done too. Now, we may mention this a little bit later, but I'll mention it now just to be sure you understand. One great thing about TINTAP is that you can go out there now and file a sales tax return and tell TINTAP, hey, I'm going to make my payment, but just make it on the 20th. Make the payment come out on the 20th and go ahead and schedule it and basically hit your confirmation button, get your confirmation number, and then you will be set and ready to roll. Okay. That is a great thing to do. In other words, a not great thing to do is to wait until the last minute and then something is wrong with your computer. You're not able to file or pay on time. Something happened with your bank is closed or something, you couldn't link or whatever. Got a problem. Don't do that. Go ahead and get it all taken care of now. So today, being the 4th of the month when we're making this recording today, you could go out there and file the December return now, and you could schedule the payment to come out on the 20th of this month. You're good. You're good to go. You don't have to think about it anymore. Put all your stuff up. You're good. So I really, really encourage you guys to do that too. Now for quarterly filers, it's the 20th day of the month that follows the end of the quarter. Annual filers, you probably figured it out. Looks like the 20th of January in the year that follows for annual filers. So very, very important. Now, I just noticed, just happened to look over on my screen. One of you said that it's easy to file a return, so easy to do, important to file even if no tax is due. And this is from Ernie. Ernie, you get 1,000 bonus points. You're exactly right. I couldn't say that any more strongly. If you're late, you don't want to pay the government extra money. We don't want to charge people money. I mean, that might seem a little bit hard for people to understand, but we are not in the business of trying to charge you money. We don't want to charge you extra money, but we have to. If the law says so, we have to do it. So it's super critical that you get this done properly. Uh, yes. Hang on just a second. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I'm back with you. So we'll go to the next slide now. Oh, did we finish sales tax? That's tremendous. Okay, so that pretty much concludes our sales tax presentation. And I hope that was helpful to you. So I want to talk a little bit about some other taxes here during this next section as we continue to move on. Again, thanks for all the information in your chat. You guys are really popping questions in, and we appreciate that a whole bunch. So I want to talk about the franchise and excise tax, which is another big tax in Tennessee. And before I talk about this, I want to tell you that I promise you, I can't talk to you about everything about franchise and excise tax in 5 minutes. It's not even possible. Okay. It's a very deep tax. It has many, many different layers. We have loads of videos that Katie and I have done with other experts in the department on various aspects of franchise and excise tax. They're in our webinar library, and you can find lots of information out there about that. So this is a very basic look at franchise tax and excise tax. So the first thing to know is that F&E tax is actually two different taxes. The first box you see at the top here, franchise tax, means that it's calculated on the greater of the net worth of the book or the book value of real or tangible property owned or used in Tennessee. That's franchise tax. Then you have the excise tax, which is based on the net earnings or the income for the tax year of your business. Now, again, this doesn't apply to every business. If you're a sole proprietor, franchise and excise tax does not apply to you, so you can forget it. If you're a general partnership, forget it. Doesn't apply to you. Now, if you're an LLC or a corporation, some other entities out there that are subject to the tax, yes, it does apply to you. And you do need to register for it. Now, this is probably a good time to stop and tell you one of the things that we have maybe is one of the biggest challenges in our department is folks who register with the Secretary of State's office fail to register with us to get their franchise and excise tax account. You must do this, okay? If you are operating your LLC or corporation in Tennessee, you're going to owe franchise and excise taxes uh, just about every time, okay? And the minimum tax on this is $100 per year, okay? So we send out a load of assessment letters. In fact, right now we're dealing with quite a few people who we just sent letters to about the 2022, 2021 tax year. And they're wondering why they got letters, what's going on, what's this tax about. Okay, don't be that guy. You're not going to be that person because you're going to get registered and you're going to be all set up. Okay, that's how franchise and excise tax works basically. So again, this sort of breaks it out a little bit more for you. And it does apply to all for-profit, foreign and domestic entities, chartered, qualified, or registered in Tennessee, doing business in Tennessee, have to file this return. Sounds familiar, right? Just what I said, right? Corporations, limited partnerships, LLCs, and business trusts, and entities are subject to F&E from the date of formation. Again, registration, like we talked about before. We already brought that up. Entities not registered with the Secretary of State are liable from the date they begin to operate with substantial nexus in our state. Nexus is that presence that we talked about before, that presence in Tennessee economically when they begin operations, if they're not actually physically in our state, okay? Or registered with the Tennessee Secretary of State, okay? So how do you register? What do you do? Well, you go on the fabulous Tennessee Department of Revenue's TIN-TAP system. You click on the registration exemption section, and then you choose the register a new business link. This is how you register for all of your different tax types, and you set them up right there. Okay. And again, this reiterates the when the entities are subject to the tax. Okay, so when to file, again, very important. So this timeline here is basically January through December. Notice there's a couple of things that are a little bit different on this than maybe some of the stuff that we've already talked about. So we know that the deadline to file and pay is the 15th day of the 4th month following the end of the tax period. Okay, so that looks a lot like April 15th in most cases. This year, April 18th, because there's an IRS holiday, a weekend stuck in there, whatever. Okay, so basically the 15th of April. But if you have an extension to file your federal return, we honor that automatically, and we will do that. And that extended deadline is now 7 months, and that'll take you all the way out to November 15th. So if you have that federal extension, we honor it, we're good to go. Okay, so we're good with that. Now, here's the problem. The problem is this: we have to have your tax money paid in on time to avoid potential penalty and interest charges, okay? Because that's the way the law is set up. So we have to have the money paid by April 15th, even though the tax return might come in later on an extended basis. Otherwise, if you pay later on or pay a little bit extra, there's probably going to be some interest charges on that. I wanted you to know that because that confuses people a lot sometimes too. But there's also something that's another layer of maybe complexity, but it's also a requirement, and that deals with these estimated payments. So if you look at the bottom of this slide right here, we talk about when these estimated payments are due. Okay, so notice that we have to get some quarterly estimated payments coming in so that this money comes in through the year to be applied to your franchise and excise return. Now, notice what's sort of weird is that when you're filing that prior year's tax return by April 15th, there's something else you have to do. You have to make your first quarter estimated payment due for the current year. So you're doing two things. You're filing last year, but you're also making your first quarter's payment for your upcoming year. Then notice in just 2 months later, in June, the second quarter's due. In September, the third quarter's due, and the next January, the final estimated payment is due by by January 15th. Okay, so that gets you all locked in at that particular point. So it's a cycle. It keeps on going. There's a little bit of overlap there, as you can see, but the filing and the payment thing with franchise and excise is super critical. The filing of estimated payments and the calculation of estimated payments gets a little tricky sometimes, and we can help you with that if that ever comes up. But again, this is a extremely basic overview today of franchise and excise, so we're not going to touch on that in great detail too. But one of the more important things about this is if you have an LLC or a corporation that you've just not had any activity on, nothing's been really going on with it, you haven't really generated any income or anything like that, you just filed and registered with the Secretary of State's office, you may just have to owe this minimum tax, this $100 tax. So what we wanted you to do is to consider making this without using the TINTAP logon system, because it is super easy to do. It's a lot easier actually to do it this way. So if you go to TINTAP and you click on the view return links section under returns, you'll see a link that says minimum $100 F&E tax. That's circled in the middle of the slide right there. Okay. That's what you want to do. You want to click on that. I'll blow it up a little bit for you so you can see. That's what it'll look like. And you want to choose that as an option because it'll have you complete just a couple of very basic information items on there, and you hit submit, you pay your $100, you're done. That's super important too. And again, if you don't file, if you don't pay, we're going to send an assessment notice to you. If you don't file and don't pay that, or don't pay that rather, then our collections people call you, and you don't want that to happen. Definitely not. That's not what we're in the business of doing. We don't like doing that. So we'd rather help you help yourself up front. Okay. This is just a little bit more of a breakdown about how those estimated payments work. I don't think I'm going to get too lost in the weeds on this because today we've gone through so much, and I think it would be a little bit taxing to just to go through every single nuance of the estimated payments. But they're here. You can see with the liability of $5,000 or more is what triggers the estimated payments there too. And then this breakout of when they're due is essentially what that timeline showed you before. Um, and then to get that extension, you have to have paid on or before the original due date. Remember what I said? An amount equal to 90% of the current liability or 100% of the previous period, or $100 if there wasn't a previous period if you're brand new. Okay, so there you go. Okay, and again, the extension's automatic. If the payment requirements have been met, we assume that you're going to have a valid federal extension based just on the payment thing. So that's pretty great. You know, we make that assumption to the taxpayer's benefit there too. And then of course, if you're making an extension payment on TINTAP, make sure that you actually make that choice. Let me blow it up for you so you can see extension payment. Make sure you choose extension payment, estimated payments. You know, you see the different kinds of payments. So be very specific about what type of payment that you're making based on what you're sending us. Okay. And then of course, when you file the return on TINTAP, you do check yes, saying that you filed an extension, if you have filed an extension or have that federal extension. Okay. And of course, for general purposes here, something you might want to know is that we have over 24 different taxes in states and or taxes and fees in Tennessee. We have listings of this on the website. Mitch is going to walk you through some resources here in a few minutes about how to find some different stuff here too. Our website has lots of information. I think a lot of you've probably been to our website and have gone out there and seen different things. We have excellent resources. Not to pat ourselves on the back, and because you know we just work. We're Tennesseans and taxpayers too, just like you are. But you know, we spend a lot of time developing materials, manuals and instructions and videos and things like that. And people from other states think that we do a pretty good job too when they try to reach out to Tennessee for information. So we're glad to do it. That's what we're paid to do. And we feel like we're obligated to take care of that for you. But anyway, tn.gov/revenue. We've got all this information. Go out there to TinTap and apply for your accounts of any type, franchise and excise, or any of these other accounts that you might owe money about. So just some general information here real quick. If you are late, because you're human and you will be late on different times, different things happen to you, emergencies in your family and things like that too. We do have to charge the penalties and the interest because the law tells us we have to. Now, the delinquency penalty is 5% of the amount that's unpaid for each month or part of a month that you're delinquent. And the maximum is 25%. Now, that can get really expensive. So you don't want that to happen to you there too. And the interest is computed at the current rate. That does change periodically, and we usually change it in July of every year. And of course, if you don't file and pay, we do have to send your tax account to our collections division. They will contact you. They will contact your bank. They will put liens on property. They do stuff like that. Okay. I don't want to scare you or threaten you, or I'm not trying to do all that. What I'm trying to do is to tell you that it's very important that you file and pay your taxes. When you get letters, delinquent letters from us, please acknowledge them. Okay. Reach out to us, call us. Even if you can't do something like, I've had a family emergency, and I can't make all my payment now. I can just pay part of it. Do that and let us know. And we'll put a note on your account saying, hey, this person said they've got a family problem. They're going to do a partial pay right now. And we're going to, that may end up over in collections, but they'll see that note as well. They'll work with you. You can possibly even set up a payment plan. Don't really recommend it because guess what? That interest and penalty still is out there regardless. Okay, too. Also, another thing you can do on our website is you can apply for a penalty waiver. That's in the TinTap area under each particular tax account that you have access to. If you have a penalty situation and you want us to consider waiving the penalty, there are some situations that we can waive the penalty. We cannot waive the interest because interest is charged by law. There's no statute that lets us get rid of interest. Okay. And then of course, overpayment, if that ever happens, we're glad to credit you for the next period, let you use that credit, and then you don't owe us as much. Or if you want to apply for a refund with us, you can do that. You can do it online on TinTap, or you can send us information otherwise, and we'll take care of it and get you refunded and all that. No problem. Refunds do take a little while, though. They take, as long as 4 to 6 weeks because there's a lot of refund requests. So probably absorbing the credit is a better way to go if you can do that. But again, we're glad to help you whichever way you want to go. So with that, I think I'm finally through talking here for a moment. I'll let Mitch come on here and talk about resources here if he's ready to go. Mitchell Gibson, are you available?
How's it going?
Great. I'm going to let you take over. I think they're maybe asleep now at this point and listening to me talk.
I got you. No
So
problem.
maybe you can wake
Yeah.
these guys up. But I tell you what, they're asking a lot of great questions, aren't they, Mitch?
Yeah. You guys are keeping us busy. A lot of great questions in there. Again, if we're not able to get to all of your questions, we'll provide you with some information on how you can contact us
Hey,
after this workshop.
hey,
And
Mitch. Mitch,
oh
can I
yes,
interrupt you? I'm
yeah.
having a harder time hearing you. Are you a little further away from your microphone or anything?
If not,
Okay, now I can hear you better. I don't know why. It could
okay,
just be on my end, but
okay.
speak again.
Well,
Okay,
if there are any issues, if you guys have any trouble hearing, then
you're
just
good. You're good now,
interrupt
Mitch,
me.
on my end. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Again, if we are not able to get to all of your questions in the chat, then please know that we're going to provide you with some information on how you can contact us after this workshop, either by phone or sending us some piece of electronic communication, and we will be able to answer your questions through that. So we're going to talk a little bit about some resources that you have available to you. We're going to be spending a lot of time on our website. Our website, I don't know how other states have it. I haven't seen every other state's website, but I really think that the state of Tennessee has done a good job in organizing the website specific to the Tennessee Department of Revenue. There's so many helpful resources there. Through different webinars that we have on specific topics, this workshop that you're currently attending, tax guides. We have a lot of different avenues that you can contact us through if you ever do need assistance, and we're going to explore some of those right now. So the number one thing that you definitely need to be familiar with if you are engaging in business in the state of Tennessee is you need to be familiar with TINTAP. Okay, TINTAP is the portal where you, the taxpayer, file all of your tax returns for the state of Tennessee as it pertains to the Department of Revenue. It is where you make all payments. It is where you receive any and all letters that the Department of Revenue send to you pertaining to your business. And so if you do have a business already and you don't have access to your TINTAP account, I really strongly advise you to create a TINTAP username, gain access to all of your tax accounts. That way you can actually have a global view of your tax accounts, and you can be in the know of what's going on with your business as it pertains to the taxes. This is a good reminder. We get a lot of businesses, taxpayers that call and say, I didn't know that I had to do this. And when we look at their tax accounts, we notice that they don't have access to their accounts, only their CPA does. So their CPA or their accountant has a username, and they've been following up on all of the tax filings, but the taxpayer doesn't have their username created. And so just because you have a CPA or an accountant who's taking care of your tax filings, it's very, very important for you, the owner of your business, to also have your own username to view your tax accounts whenever you need to. Because just because you have a CPA or an accountant doesn't mean that things are always going to be done when they're supposed to be done. And so there's a lot of great CPAs and accountants out there. But as a business owner, you always want to be able to view your tax accounts at all time. And so be sure to create a TINTAP username as soon as possible. So TINTAP, this is where you can register for any and all tax accounts. It's where you can electronically file all Tennessee tax returns that pertain to your business. As Billy said earlier, you can schedule payments in advance. That's a really, really cool feature. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I can be very forgetful. And so if you're filing your return maybe a week early prior to the due date, but you don't want the payment to be drafted out of your account that same day, you can schedule that payment to be drafted at a future date when you are able to make that payment. And so scheduling payments in advance is a really cool feature. Automatic correction of common errors. And so if you try to file an electronic return and there's errors on the return, TINTAP will not allow you to submit that return until all the errors are corrected. That's a very helpful resource. We get a lot of taxpayers that may file by paper and maybe they fill out that return incorrectly. The problem is when we receive that return, it's probably going to be keyed incorrectly too because it's not completed correctly. So filing electronically can kind of help avoid some of those errors when trying to fill out the return. So that's one of the many pros to filing electronically as opposed to mailing a return in. It's very easy to amend returns. It's very easy to make a mistake. If you did make a mistake on a return and you accidentally filed a number incorrectly, or your gross sales amount was incorrect, or maybe you didn't claim a deduction or an exemption that you didn't recall when you were filing your return, you can go back and amend that return. It's very easy to do that in TINTAP. You can also access returns that you've filed in the past. This is a very helpful thing when if you need to look at previous years. You can view those returns and what you filed and those payments that you submitted back in the past. So that's a positive thing as well. You can also access certificates and letters in TINTAP. That's very important. There was a lot of questions when Billy was talking about sales tax of where can I access my sales tax certificates? Those can be accessed in TinTap. You just have to navigate when you log in and gain access to your account. You just have to click on the more ... tab and then click on the letters section, and all of your letters pertaining to sales tax, or really any tax account for that matter, will be displayed there. And of course, there's a lot more features in TinTap that we're going to try to cover as well. There's a resource known as Revenue Help that is very helpful. That's why it's called Revenue Help. Revenue Help is a place where the Tennessee Department of Revenue has compiled hundreds of articles on very specific topics that you can go to, and you can just search a keyword. Let's say you are starting a short-term rental business and you're unsure of what you need to do. You can navigate to Revenue Help. You can just search TN Revenue Help, and you can search short-term rentals. Just search that keyword and it will display any and all articles that we have published pertaining to short-term rentals in that business activity. Just a couple examples on this slide. We have general TinTap how-to videos. And so if you're unsure about how to do something in TinTap, we may have a video that can guide you on how to utilize TinTap or how to use it. We've got a TinTap logon, TinTap registration, TinTap payments. We have all of those help desk articles available to you. And again, we also have very specific articles that pertain to tax laws and filing requirements, who should be required to file, who shouldn't be required to file. We probably have a help desk article that someone within the department has published, and we update those frequently as the laws change. And it even provides you with references to the Tennessee law, Tennessee Code Annotated. So that can be a very helpful resource to have as well when starting a business, because a lot of businesses just want to make sure that they're doing it the right way. And this can be a very helpful tool to help build confidence for yourself as a business owner in knowing that you are doing it the right way. And so utilize Revenue Help. I'm going to try to share my screen a little later, and I can navigate to Revenue Help to show you where it's at on our website. We also have a TinTap assistant. And so if the screen that you're currently looking at, this is our TinTap homepage before you log in. Okay, so you'll notice you have your username, you have your password, but we have a TinTap assistant. It's a chat feature where you're just chatting with the system, and you can search keywords, and it can provide you links to different parts of our website that pertain to whatever it is that you searched. In the example right there, it looks like that person wants a real person. They want to speak to a real person. And so it sends them a link to our contact page, okay, and gives them lists of phone numbers to use for whatever specific department or whatever specific unit that they need to speak to. And so you can utilize that feature as well. When you get into TinTap, this is what a TinTap account looks like after you log in. This is what's called the summary page or the home page. If you notice, this taxpayer, this Jim Jones Corp., I would assume that this is a dummy account because their address is 500 Dedrick Street. That is the address of our office. And so they have a business tax account, and they also have a franchise and excise tax account, okay? So it's safe to assume that those are the only two tax accounts that they have for the state of Tennessee for this business. There's a couple of different tabs up at the top. You've got your favorites, you've got summary, you've got action center, you have settings, and you have more. Action center is a wonderful tab because that is anything that is requiring action of you, the taxpayer. So if you need to file a return, or you need to make a payment, or something that needs your attention or requires some type of action, there's going to be a listing under that tab. On the summary tab that we are currently looking at, if you'll notice, there are 3 links to the right of each tax account. You have make a payment, you have view file returns, you also have additional actions and licenses. Okay, so let's say you needed to view 2017's business tax return. Okay, you would click on view file returns for business tax. And then it would show you a listing of all the filing periods that you would have. And then you would just have to navigate to 2017 and you would be able to see the return that you filed there, plus any payments that you made, anything like that. And you would do that for each tax account. You also have an option that says manage my profile. This is where you can essentially update any settings or any features pertaining to your TINTAP logon. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you want to grant access to someone to be able to view your tax accounts, or maybe you want to remove access from someone. You can do that there. There's also some other features where you can update email addresses, phone numbers for your business. You would do that under Manage My Profile as well. So it's a really, really helpful summary of how to navigate just the general aspects of TINTAP. The More tab in the center of the screen, right to the right of Settings, that's a really important tab. If you have not explored that tab, whenever you log in next, just click on it. This is where you can update business addresses, you can view your letters, you can apply for payment plans. It's a wonderful place that has a lot of awesome resources there. And so next time you log in, be sure to check that tab out specifically. Just to reiterate the Action Center, this is what it looks like when you click on the Action Center tab. And so currently this taxpayer has 7 unread messages. Messages sent to you may contain important information about your accounts. So these may be notices of proposed assessments. These may be just random updates that are made to your account that we want to make you aware of. And so this particular business, it looks like they have 7 messages that they haven't seen yet. And so if you do see any indicators or any notifications for Action Center, go ahead and check it out. See if it's anything that's super, super important. Also, it shows that they have a $15 balance due on their sales tax account. And they have not filed their April 2021 sales tax return yet. So both of those actions are required in order to get that sales tax account current. And so that's a wonderful feature in TINTAP as well. So if you see any notifications on the Action Center tab, be sure to click that because there could be some really important information pertaining to your business. Oh yeah, so here is a little bit about what that More tab looks like. There's an option where you can manage accounts, you can manage your payments. There's additional services available to you. You can control the access of the TINTAP account. You can manage the names and addresses of the business. And then most importantly, this is where you can view your letters. So if you look on the bottom right, there's a section titled Letters. Just click on View Letters, and that will show you any and all letters that have been sent from the Tennessee Department of Revenue. It's a little cut off, but if you look at the very bottom left, it says submissions. So sometimes we get taxpayers that just forget that they submitted a return, or they forget that they submitted a payment, or they just want to know when they actually submitted something. If you click on the submissions section, you can actually view any and all submissions that you, the taxpayer, submitted through this TINTAP account. Okay, so any payments, any returns, any claim for refund requests, any penalty waiver requests, really anything that can be submitted, you can view that in the submissions section. This is what the homepage for our website looks like. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me see. Right here. I think I've got it. Billy, can you see my screen currently?
Yes, sir. We are good.
So you can see my mouse moving?
I can see the screen is pulled up. I don't know that I see your mouse is moving.
Okay, but you can see our home website, correct?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. So this is just the home screen for our website. This is a great place to start when trying to utilize all the different resources available to you. At the very beginning of this presentation, when we started at 8:30, Billy went over the new business resource that we have on our website. How to navigate to that is just click on this link down below that says For Businesses. When you click on that, there's going to be a link titled For New Businesses. When you click on that, we have a step-by-step process that you can walk yourself through when trying to get everything situated in the state of Tennessee. And so when you click on each of these tiles here, it provides you with a checklist that you can go through in determining exactly how you need to get registered and to make sure that you're doing it correctly. Because again, the overwhelming majority of taxpayers, they only care about trying to do everything as correctly as possible. And this is a resource that you can use as a new business to ensure that you're doing that. Let's see. When I was talking about revenue help, where you can access different articles on specific topics, we have a tile specifically for revenue help, and it is right here. When you click on revenue help, it's going to take you to our revenue help desk. And this is where you can search for any keywords. Let's say you have questions about manufactured homes. That's a very specific topic.
Hey,
When you
Mitch.
search manufactured homes,
Mitch,
that
I am
will,
seeing your cursor now. I did want you to know. Thanks.
okay, thank you. So when you, if let's say you are engaged in the business of selling manufactured homes, you can search that keyword and that will produce any and all articles that we have pertaining to manufactured homes. Okay. So this is a really, really helpful resource. The cool thing about it is even if you click on a revenue help desk article, it shows you related articles to what you just searched. And so you may need to piece together 2 or 3 articles to find the answer that you want. This is a very, very helpful resource. And as mentioned, these get updated regularly whenever the tax laws change. And it gives you a timestamp as to when this revenue help desk article was last updated. So this last time this specific revenue help desk article was updated was June 11th, 2021 at 8:19. I'm going to say that's AM. But it also gives references to the Tennessee Code. And so these are all resources that you can use as the business owner to just sort of create that confidence that you're doing everything as accurately as possible. Okay. And then, of course, more importantly, this is the link to TinTap. So when you click on that, it takes you directly to the TinTap page where you can log in. That's the TinTap assistant that I was talking about earlier. Also, we have what you just attended, the workshop, but we also have webinars. How you navigate to that is we have a tile here that says taxpayer education. When you click on that, you can view the tax webinar schedule that we have and attend the different tax webinars. Here's the new business workshop that you're currently attending. And it also has a couple of other resources that you can use. One specifically that we like to encourage taxpayers to use is we have tax manuals available. These tax manuals go into each specific tax. And again, you can search keywords in those pertaining to your business activity and finding the answers to the questions that you have. So this is a very, very helpful resource as well. These also, of course, get updated every so often when legislation changes. Let's see. I think I'm gonna stop sharing. Let's see. Yep. Okay. And then moving on, we've got a couple of other miscellaneous resources. We have the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. This is an online tool that helps you visualize your business model and connects you with resources across the state. So again, we can all provide you with a copy of this PowerPoint so you can have access to these links. But this is a link to the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development Smart Guide that they have available. There's also a smart portal that can be used. And again, this can help you visualize your business model and also connect you with other resources that may be helpful to you. We have the Tennessee Small Business Development Center. The Business Development Center, it's a network of centers that provide counseling and training to help small business owners start, grow, and expand their businesses. So, you know, if you're really nervous about starting a new business, but you're wanting to learn, this may be a really, really good resource for you, and it can put you in contact with counselors or training to help you build that confidence in starting your new business. We also have the SCORE Association. The SCORE Association is a volunteer business. It involves volunteer business counselors, advisors, and mentors who offer individual free to low-cost counseling throughout the U.S. So if, again, this is just another resource, if you're unsure about how to start your new business, this is a resource that you can use that can get you in contact with a potential advisor or mentor. And some of those services may even be free or low cost. And so be sure to check that out. We also have the Small Business Administration that their website has a lot of helpful resources such as business guides, funding programs, and a couple of other resources as well. And then, of course, social media. It's just a part of our lives now. So we are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. And so if you guys are on any of those platforms, be sure to follow us because we update, we send out any important updated information through those platforms as well. So that's just another vehicle that we try to use to communicate with the taxpayer and provide as much education as possible. And we've went over our website, which is tn.gov/revenue. When I shared my screen, that was the home screen that I was on. You can also send us, as we've said multiple times, if we can't answer your questions in the chat or we haven't been able to just yet, there's a couple of different ways that you can contact us. So you can you can email us at revenue.support@tn.gov. That will send us a piece of electronic communication that we will then respond to you. So send us any questions there. You can also call us at 615-253-0600. That is our general call center. That we have a pretty extensive menu. So if you need to speak to someone, a specific unit, then there are different options that you can select once you call the 0600 number. And please know that we are open Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:30 Central Standard Time. Okay. And I think that covers the majority of it. Billy, did I miss anything?
Yes, you need to go through everything you just talked about.
Hey, it wouldn't be the first time.
Okay, no. Oh my gosh. This is an incredible amount of material, and I hope that when we've been able to go through and answer most of the questions that everybody's had today. Like we said earlier in the presentation as we began this morning, opening a business in Tennessee is really vital to our economy and employing people and keeping things moving in Tennessee. So when you are doing this sort of thing, you're really helping out everybody in our state. So we appreciate that. We do want to remind you again, when you do have questions, you see the resources here that Mitch just mentioned, our website, our email, and our phone number. We're very glad to help you with any other questions that you might have. So as you leave today, when you leave today's event, you'll be given a survey that for you to complete. Give us some feedback so that we can continue to improve what we've done here today. And we want to thank also Dan and Katie and Stephanie for helping out in chat today and for all the work that you guys always do on these things. So Mitch, we especially thank you as being one of our guest presenters today. And Mitch will now go back to making sure our call center is fully functional, which it always is anyway, but it's especially important right now when we're so busy. So again, on behalf of our department, we thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you another time. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.